Hey guys, it is Tim with Tabletop Terrors, and I am currently live here. So I'm giving it like 5 seconds because my entire screen is blank. So I'm letting you know if you're joining me and you're like, why is Tim just sitting there? It's because hey, Matt Click joined. I think it kicked it into gear. I am Tim. This is Daily Damage. Daily Damage is a stream that I try to do every weekday where we just have discussions about tabletop RPGs and creativity. I'm with the channel Tabletop Terrors, and I'm also one quarter of the publishing company Absolute Tabletop. And so the thing I always start with when we do streams is the rundown. The rundown is a bulleted list of some things you should check out this week, specifically because it takes about 10 to 12 seconds for the stream to share and spread. So I always start with that. So, what's up, Matt? The first thing I want to show you is a terrible paper representation of a beautiful thing that Matt Click made. This infographic. So, we just wrapped up something called Absolute Creativity. And Absolute Creativity is something that we did with our publishing company, Absolute Tabletop. So we essentially said, how about this, world, girl? What if you write 200 or more words creatively, anything you want, but inspired by a map that Matt drew with his own fingers and pen and parchment, graph parchment? What if you did that? What if you what if you wrote 200 words or more based on the map that Matt drew, and in return, what Absolute Tabletop would do is give you a free supplement. Any of our supplements at all. And we have supplements that range from, a couple bucks all the way up to like $10. And it didn't matter. Whatever you submitted, you could choose anyone you wanted. And the idea was to get people creative. And the response was absolutely tremendous. So what I'm going to do for this rundown is I'm going to go over this beautiful infographic that Matt Click created, starring our very own Party Cleanup Lion. And that's a longer story than I care to tell right now. But we're going to do a rundown right now. So here is where we ended up on Absolute Creativity. We had 556 total submissions. So that's amazing already. That's fantastic. 556 people sat down and were creative for a purpose. And I think that that's phenomenal. Words written. Oh, man. 75,655 words written. That's like a chapter in a Game of Thrones book. So that is a lot of words. And that's the combined word count of all of the supplements. I call them supplements. All the submissions for Absolute Creativity. The busiest day, so we did this for, I think it was about 35 days. And the busiest day was August 31st. People just got creative that day, so they hopped in and did that. The most popular supplement was Be a Better Campaign Master, which was 186 copies that we gave away. Now, as far as the monetary value, if you were to buy all of the supplements that were given away, total, we gave away $2,858 worth of free RPG material. So we awarded almost $3,000 worth of RPG material just for people being creative. And it felt great, and it was awesome. And I'm really glad that we did it. It was something that, it took a lot of work on our end to kind of figure out the logistics of getting everybody their book and making sure that, it actually flowed well. So huge thanks to James, who created a system and infrastructure on the back end to kind of automate the process to a degree. Huge thanks to Barker, who was doing everything manually until we automated everything. And Matt, when you said you were going to make an infographic, I was like, oh, cool, that'll be cool. This thing that I'm showing doesn't even do it justice. The infographic that Matt made, if you check out the Absolute Tabletop Facebook page, is gorgeous. It's better than what I would have done, Matt. So I think it's phenomenal. So that is the rundown. Thank you to everybody who participated in Absolute Creativity. Let's check the chat. Barker says, Timitom. Rob Coletta says, tremendous Tim. Let's see here. Andre Martinez joined. What's up, Andre? Brigade Con barreling down, baby. It's coming at us from every side. Marquise joined. What's up? Alexander Kostick. Hello, Tim. What's up, man? Ben Buckner says, I hope Absolute Tabletop's generosity and support is returned tenfold. You guys are more than awesome, and you're inspirational. Thank you, man. I already think that this has been a fantastic opportunity to reach people that we wouldn't otherwise reach. And so I think that it's the start of something great. I think we plan on doing this every year. I think that Absolute Creativity is something we want to sort of grow. And as we do it each year, hopefully it'll get bigger and bigger, and we'll give away more and more stuff. I love it. It's almost like Absolute Tabletop's sort of taxed version of, free comic book day or, free RPG day, where it's like, I think there was something special about having to work for it. I know that there are things that I download where I'll be like, oh, sure, I'll sign up for your email list and I'll get your free book. And then I download the free book and it sits on my Dropbox for eternity. And so I think that there was this barrier of entry that stirred people to be creative. And then on the flip side, when you work for something, I think you're more like, all right, I'm going to sit down and flip open this book because I just wrote 200 plus words for it. Some of the submissions were well over 200 words. I didn't get the word count on the longest submission, but if I had to guess, I'd say it had to be 2,000 words or more. Yeah. Clyde says, Preppy Tim. Is it because of my polo for work? That's funny. Marquis says, I heard there would be Mystics, Psionics today. Now I hunger. That was clickbait. I'm not going to talk about any of that. In fact, I'm going to sell you guys some life insurance. So buckle up. Do you or a loved one? No, I'm kidding. So it all ties together. And I'm going to jump into our campaign world of Dragon Grin. We work on it more and more every day. And we're writing the campaign setting. And the guidebook to it is going to be called A Dead Man's Guide to Dragon Grin. And the way that psionics work in the world has never really come up, in my mind anyway. And recently, Matt Click in The Provokers Season 2, as well as in the one-shot he ran, The Masked Mage on a Fistful of Dice's page, was talking about psionics, and specifically the elves of Haldrathine, and how psionics work in Aeronoth and so on. And that honestly got me thinking. And this is the chain of events, I think, that happens in our campaign worlds, is that when one of us takes action and is inspired by something, the logical question would be, well, how does that manifest in my world? And so, I was talking a little bit to James. I'm like, psionics. And here's the thing with me and psionics. I don't dislike psionics at all, but I think it has a strong propensity to jump the shark in tone. I think, for instance, in a lot of the implementation, like in concept and in theory, it's really cool, but a lot of the implementation I've seen of psionics changes the flavor of the game so much that it's almost like kind of an add-on that doesn't fit properly. It's like something that's like kind of plugged in, and I can always sense that it's like plugged in. But anyway, all that to say, I think that there should be some version of psionics in Dragon Grin. And so it got me thinking, and one of the things I'm doing right now is that, we're working on the race playtest. So if you want to be involved in that, you can send an email to Racing Stripes at tabletopterrors.com, and you can get some information on how to be a part of that playtest. But one of the things that started to come up is I thought it would be really cool to play off of something we did in our Deep Vault supplement. There is a race of gnomes known as the Sarfin gnomes. And in my mind, I think the Sarfin gnomes started to gain a lot more clarity. So I started to kind of get a more shape of like, okay, here's what I think they are. The Sarfin Gnomes essentially went into this pocket dimension a long time ago. And, it's funny. It's a lot like Fraggle Rock in a way. To them, our world is outer space. So to them, when they travel over to our plane, it's like they're visiting. So when they have a city or a village or something like this, it's like an outpost to a degree. But I know for a long time, too, I've always thought, I want to have this sort of Australian continent that's called Bismore, that is essentially if Australia met Numenera, just... And I'm thinking now, stranded Sarfin Gnomes. To me, that's where the Sarfin Gnomes are going to live, and I think that that's where they're going to be, is in Bismore. So now I imagine them as these teched up, goggle-wearing, sort of astral travelers. But I also thought that living in the Ord Mist, this pocket dimension, think of it this way. The Ord Mist is sort of like if the Feywild were science. Just kind of think of it that way. So I'm thinking of them as these goggled, teched up, but not sci-fi necessarily. Sort of, I don't know if you've ever seen Disney's Journey to Atlantis. That sort of tribal tech. I don't know. And we're still kind of working on that. But the thought process came to me, and I thought, all right, here's the thing. Dragon Grin has never necessarily had steampunk, okay? Though a lot of the elements have this magitech, is what Matt Click calls it. He kind of introduced me to that term. This magitech flair where there's no doubt that there's technology. But I started to kind of have this shape in my mind of, okay, these Sarfin Gnomes who are from this pocket dimension, they have developed a form of psionics because it's more akin to their homeworld. So I started to think of psionics as less mystic and more science. So I don't know, and I'm still kind of playing with that idea. So that's the first thing. I'm going to go to the chat here. Let's go here. Marquis says, can't wait for this snake oil pitch. I'm not sure which part. Which part am I pitching you on? Here's the thing, guys. Oh, it's probably the life insurance joke. Melvin joined. What's up, man? Sean is here. Alexander says, when will we be able to read all the submissions? Can't wait to see what other creative people from the community wrote. I'm 100% sure that all are brilliant. That's actually funny. I don't know that we have permission to share the submissions beyond... we said that we would share some through our Facebook page, and we were, continuing to do that. I'll tell you the flat-out truth. We haven't read every single submission. Not yet. I know I'm still working through. But to share every one would be another absolute creativity-sized task. So we'd have to maybe come up with a way to do that or drop them on a Google Drive. But, again, I don't think that would be a problem. So maybe we can do that. Some of them were not safe for work or anything like that. Some were pretty graphic and sexual. But that's worth looking at. Clyde says, dang, you should do that for a Call of Cthulhu sales pitch. What's up, Drake? Jacob Norman's here. Clyde Melson says, Bizzlespark, the Barghast Hunter. Marquis says, steampunk. Sounds like tribal-themed steampunk. Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. I like to turn things on their ear, but not to the degree to where it's like, hey, look, don't be the Doom movie from the mid-2000s and just, it's Doom in name, but nothing else lines up. It's like, if it's going to be something, if it's going to be something entirely different than psionics, then I'll call it something different. But as of right now, it's almost like the fusing of being able to understand with a sort of analytical mind, the way a scientist or an inventor would, how to alter the mysticism. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Science psionics. Dragon Eggs Benedict says, like mutants or X-Men? Oh, Matt made a really good point. Everyone owns their own submissions. We don't own any of them, so they're feel free to share them. In fact, if you want to share them, I'm trying to think of a short hashtag, but if it would be like AB create 16, then that's some way we can actually track them. AB create 16. Rob Coletta says, listening to you whilst writing a bunch of flavor for the lore keepers. Daily Dermage is spurring me on. Good. I hope this is inspiring to some degree. I'm kind of working through it myself, but here's my other thought process that I thought was interesting. The Sarfin gnomes, and this is where the retconning comes into place. Now, retconning, if you're not familiar with that term, is very, very common in comic books, and it means retroactive continuity. It's when you go back and explain a thing with another thing, or rewrite or revamp a thing entirely. It's not quite a reboot. So we've seen a couple of reboots in the last 5 years in Marvel and DC both. So it's not a reimagining, it's not a reboot. It's going back and defining with clarity something that already happened and rewriting bits of it so that it makes sense with your current vision, essentially. So the Sarfin gnomes have already been fully decked out in the Deep Vault supplement on AbsoluteTabletop.com. So there's actually a subrace you can choose, and there's a history. And the very basic gist of it is, in our world, the Titans were these technologically advanced creatures from the dawn of Earth, essentially, the dawn of the planet. And they have this technology, essentially, that the Sarfin gnomes hijacked and used to make a pocket dimension. So in the book Deep Vault, it posits that the Ord Mist is collapsing. Their pocket dimension is collapsing. So the concept is that the Sarfin gnomes are in our world looking for a solution to their world collapsing. But it just kind of, in my mind, I thought it would be really interesting to match the mysticism of psionics with the sort of science of what I'm now imagining the Sarfin gnomes. Now, these aren't tinker gnomes per se. Imagine more explorer gnomes. They're brilliant, but they're not your standard sort of making clockwork toys and constantly inventing things and sort of. I don't imagine them as that. I think that they're very academic, and I feel like I would love it if there was some sort of. Actually, this would be cool, and this is just spitballing. I would love it if they have this huge ship that is basically half in the Ord Mist and half in our world, and it's the way you get in and out of the Ord Mist. But I love the idea that they are seeing our world as, like I said, an alien place. To them, this is, okay, this world is tethered, it's secure, and maybe even has something to do with the bleak. I'm not sure, but I was really thinking, I think that perhaps the Ord Mist, essentially, is the gateway to psionics. So that doesn't necessarily mean that psionics will have to be scientifically accessed. I don't want to make it so that it's like, well, to be a psionic in Dragon Grid, you have to have 2 degrees, and you have to have your AA and your bachelor's. It's like, no, I think that the Sarfin gnomes they're very smart, and they're using psionics as a way to be efficient. That's kind of how I see them. It's like an efficiency play with them. I can communicate an idea to you instantly. I don't have to think about it and then say it. I can just think about it, and then you know the idea, and then you know the idea. And it's like, imagine how quickly you could work. Like, if we were making an AbTab supplement, and all I had to do was just share my mind, oh man, the fart jokes would be unending. We'd never get anything done. But that's how I see the Sarfin. The Sarfin they're using this psionic power as a technological play of efficiency. But through the Ord Mist, they are letting it into Dragon Grin. So I see this, which also explains that sort of Numenera flavor of Bismore. It's very mystical. There's a lot of psionics happening because it's seeping into the landscape. It's kind of edging into the world, and I think there are other people who would probably have a propensity toward it that wouldn't be scientific, and that's how you get your standard mystic psionics from the world. But I think it would also be interesting to flavor them differently depending on how they access those powers. So let's go ahead and say, check the chat. Dragon Eggs Benedict. I like the idea of a group of gnomes that are more adaptive, industrious than inventive and industrious. That's what it is. They're adaptive. That's a good way to put it. Utilitarian. And so, like I said, I'm just imagining what I think most, like if I've seen some of the Pathfinder pictures, like the Artificers and some of those more, they got the aprons and the leather gloves up to here, and the goggles. The goggles, they do nothing. That sort of gnome. I just would love this group of like 4 Sarfin Indiana Jones style gnomes who are taking this reverse dungeon delve out of the Ord Mist into our world and looking for things. And I don't have all the pieces yet, but that's part of the creative process, is just going with it and saying, hey, here's what I do have. Let me lay it out and just talk it out and let it ruminate. And, as I pick up pieces through the idea net, and honestly, too, between Barker, Matt, and James, those are 3 really smart guys who make my ideas better. I'll run it by them and say, hey, what do you think? And a lot of times, they'll plug up the holes. Alexander says, I don't know why psionic gnomes bring an image to my mind where gnomes ride big subterranean beetles addicted to Azurician, an azure blue crystal, which is valued by psionic users for their properties. They're gnomes who hunt these crystals for a living, and oftentimes, during their search, the gnomes involuntarily discover ancient dungeons. Okay, I love this. Here is what that inspired me to say. I think that these Sarfin gnomes see the bleak as an erratic but consistent energy source. And so they, I think, are like, hey, our Ord Mist, our pocket dimension created by the ancients, is dying. Maybe it's like, I don't know enough science to really be able to say this accurately, but it's like a dying star, essentially. So this pocket dimension is slowly burning out, and they're like, hey, here's what. We think that if we harness this power, and essentially they're trying to harness the power of the bleak, or maybe siphon it or filter it, because the bleak is unending and it's volatile and erratic, but they're like, hey, if we can harness this. So now you're talking about Sarfin gnome bleak fueled technology. So this could also be crazy, because in the world of Dragongrin, this could be one of the fissures from which the great old ones are awakened. Like, this could be your sort of gateway, your portal to a cosmic entity and a cosmic sort of horror, where it's like, they're from the Ord Mist, they're trying to sort of siphon this magical energy known as the bleak. They're trying to kind of use it. Yeah, okay, we can do this. We can siphon it. We can change it. We can turn it into this different energy source. It's like petroleum to them, but it's not going great, and it's dangerous. It's volatile, and perhaps it releases something in between the Ord Mist and our realms that starts to kind of creep up, which then makes Bismore Numenera meets Australia meets Lovecraft. And I gotta say, I'm not mad at that. So, Alexander, that was a super sick idea, man. That was awesome. Marquis says, what is the Ord Mist again? Hopefully I think I answered that before I saw this comment. Also, I think Doctor Strange movie trailers are a good example of psionics and mysticism in a D&D game. That's actually a really good point. You know what? I think I'm going to have the luxury of seeing that film before the book comes out, so I'll definitely be able to glean from that. But what are your thoughts? What do you guys think? I have this picture in my mind right now, and sort of, that's what I'm thinking. Goggled gnome standing atop, like, you know what it is? Okay, here, imagine this. Beginning of Star Wars Force Awakens, Rey in the desert, all goggled up and all this other stuff, but a gnome. Think that. That's the Sarfin gnomes. And then they communicate with each other through psionics. But that's another thing, too. Here, subsect. They're communicating with each other through psionics, but when they rip open this sort of fabric between the worlds, between the Ord Mist and our dimension, this thing between the spaces, this Lovecraftian, eldritch sort of horror, I think that could be a way that it's sort of seeping into their subconscious, is it's riding those waves. They basically have, okay, let's use an analogy from modern day. This thing's a virus, and all these computers are networked. All these Sarfin gnomes are networked. So what happens when you're used to having to communicate psionically, and that's how you operate, that's how you think, it's your thought process, it's your functioning, and then it becomes dangerous. it becomes where you can't do it long, if at all, because you can become tainted. Or so now, immediately, this is where your sort of dark Sarfin come from. These eldritch gnomes who have, they're the star spawn of this thing that's in between the realms that is riding their psionic waves. And it just kind of gets in their mind. And so now you have these like Cthulhu-esque aberration, sort of star spawn gnomes. I don't know. It's just, it seems like a lot of cool ideas. It seems like a lot of cool imagery. It seems like a cool place to run adventures. An outpost, a Sarfin outpost that's just overrun. It's like John Carpenter's The Thing. Like, I don't know. There's just a lot about this that it creates a very specific tone in Dragongran, and then also has, I think, a ripple effect on the rest of the world that doesn't change the entire game. It just makes it very heavy in that area, which gives a conflict outside of the big bad evil of the Dismembered Lord, in control and his troops and everything. It's an external sort of force. So Rob Coletta says, what is the Dismembered Lord's attitude to psionics? A tool to take advantage of, or a threat that must be quelled? So to me, this has never been like released as canon, but in my head canon, the Dismembered Lord uses, and you could call it psionics, you could call it the bleak or bleak staring or bleak looking or whatever. I believe that the Dismembered Lord is heavily into prophecy, and I believe that he is very smart when it comes to literally knowing the mind of your enemy and using any means necessary to be able to see outcomes, multiple outcomes, and choose the best result. And I believe that he does this using what we call imminence in our world, which is sort of like the force of Dragongran. And it's, to give you an example, in the Deep Vault book on AbsoluteTabletop.com, there's a hammer called a Vostek hammer. And one of the abilities it has, it's a recharge 5 or 6, but one of the abilities this thing has is the flavor, is that it sees all possible attacks. It uses imminence to say, okay, of the 1,000 timelines, okay, here's the best attack. And then it hits automatically and it takes a dex save. So by thinking of it that way, the Dismembered Lord is able to sort of see multiple timelines and say, we're going to go this way. So that I think that the Dismembered Lord would love psionics, but hate others wielding it that were not in his charge. I think that that'd be important. So great question. Ben Buckner says, the linked psionic gnomes reminds me of John Scalzi's Old Man's War. It's sci-fi, but there are some good ideas in it. Dude, that's awesome. Tell me more about that. If it's required reading, I might have to look into that. Alexander Kostick says, Eldritch in D&D should be called Elfdritch. Waka waka. Marquis says, bleak gazers. Yeah, I kind of was, bleak seers, bleak gazers, these people that essentially, they divine through the bleak. They, and they gotta be blind. I mean, am I right? Like, you gotta go blind looking at the bleak. You're staring at the arcane sun, you're probably gonna go blind. I think. But then you got some opportunities to, throw in some flavor there for some like Daredevil style people where it's like, listen, I've been blinded by gazing into the bleak so long, figuratively and literally, but I have a sixth sense now. I have a bleak sense. So, maybe that's the dark Sarfin, these sort of little nasties that have let the Eldritch thing take over. Maybe that they are so steeped in the bleak, they get a bleak sense where it's like they can't see. And mechanically, I don't know, just spitballing here. But like mechanically, maybe true sight for 30 feet, and then tremor sense for 60. I don't know, or true sight for 60, tremor sense 120. Just make them creepy little buggers where it's like they don't need eyes, Event Horizon's like, well, hey, why is Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park got eyes bleeding? He's talking about going in space. No, but really, we won't need eyes when we're going. Chris Wilhelm's here. What's up, man? Love the new podcast. Guys, check out Chris Wilhelm. He has a new podcast on dropdice.com. And it's, I'm going to forget the exact name. The Whispering Stones. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. But go to his site, and the first episode is there, and it's sort of it's a lore podcast about the lore of his world. So yeah, it's really cool. Dragongrin Benedict. I think it would be cool if these people who stare into the arcane sun are scarred in some obscure way. Absolutely. The bleak it's toxic in a way, it's radioactive in a way, to a degree. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea. I just wanted to talk this through, and the last thing I want to talk about is guns. Guns in Dragongrin. Ho ho, guns. So I want to talk to you today about gun control in Dragongrin. So one of the things that James and I have steered clear of, by and large, is is firearms being readily accessible. Is guns being like, oh, I've got a blaster on my hip, that kind of thing. I don't think that's going to change. I think, and here's one argument that I was thinking of earlier. I understand that guns are for the people that don't have magic. And I think that that's a clever way to do it. But I feel like in Dragongrin, the science isn't quite there to have a gun that's worth it, if that makes sense. So, you are better off carrying a bow. You're better off carrying a crossbow. Because I would think that if there is actual literal gunpowder, it'd be much more volatile, and it would be difficult to load, and I just don't see many actual guns, rifles, pistols in Dragongrin. I think there would be some. I just don't think that they would be prevalent. One of the things we were toying with is making the mountain elves sort of the ones who have spearheaded this sort of arcane technology where they can fire weapons using, essentially you'd have these small bullets that would have the material components of the spells, and by using sort of a crystal on the flintlock, they shoot it, and I don't know, we kind of spitballed that, but I don't know, what are your thoughts? What do you think about guns in Dragongrin? Yes? No? Maybe so? Sometimes? I don't know. I like the idea, the flavor idea of guns being really rare, and I don't know. I just don't think that they would be as powerful with the other stuff around. The other thing is they would be super expensive, and to most in Dragongrin, I don't think it would be worth the cost of operation. It's like, if you know anybody that owns a boat in real life, it's something you have to have cleaned regularly. To gas it up costs a fortune. You have to have all this maintenance done on it all the time. You have to have a trailer, and you have to have it stored, and all this other stuff, and it's like, it's a very expensive thing. So in the same way, I imagine that guns in Dragongrin would be that same way. It's not this cheap, easy to kind of maintain thing. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I've got this gun, and it's cool. So maybe guns would be a tool for the wealthy, and it would be more sort of a mark of power. Like, you have the money to spend on a gun. I don't know. What do you think? All right, so so Rob says, well, first, Hassan says, Bleak Sense sounds super cool. Rob says, Tim, you simply must create Daredevil and Dragongrin now. I know, right? Like a ranger with Bleak Sense? That'd be sick. Marquis says, Bleak Sense. True sight 30 feet. Advantage on any saving throws within 10 feet due to their ability to see the different fates and timelines. Sure. That's a good kind of representation of it. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting feat to be able to take. Dragon Eggs Benedict. Dragon Eggs Benedict will remember this. Chris Wilhelm says, it is the stones are magic items in the world. Oh, so I think you're saying that, yeah, I see what you're saying. Check out the podcast. I don't want to ruin the explanation, but I enjoyed it. Sean Murphy, the idea of bleak gazers reminds me of the Blue Oyster Cult song, Veteran of the Psychic Ward. I love that song. I also love Metallica's acoustic cover of that song. Super cool. Blue Oyster Cult, a lot of like fringe sci-fi lyrics that were kind of ahead of their time. Really love it. Rob Coletta says, I imagine black powder would be a resource that the dismembered lord would have swooped up quickly anyway. Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I like the idea. You know who handles this pretty well is Game of Thrones. They've got, you know, the green fire, which is obviously the extent to which they can harness, store safely, and use to affect explosives. And I think that there would be explosives in that sort of ilk in Dragongrin. I just don't see, like, I don't want to see the dwarves running around with blunderbusses. And I don't know, maybe I'm being dumb about that. Maybe that's what everybody imagines with Dragongrin, is, you know, a dwarf kind of running up World of Warcraft style, pulling out a blunderbuss and popping off a squeaker. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point, Rob. I feel like the Dismembered Lord would have definitely sort of put it. Maybe he tried to choose a timeline where it didn't become prevalent or was discovered. Alexander says, movie idea, bleak spotting. The synopsis? Renton, deeply immersed in the Dragongrin bleak scene, tries to clean up and get out, despite the allure of the bleak and the influence of his friends. Love it. We can have Bluin Blagregor play it. Marquis says, I want to be a copper jackal with a revolver. Honestly, I would see a copper jackal having a revolver. And I would see maybe like the part, I don't even know what it's called, but is it the loader? On a revolver is at the chamber, the circular part, the cylinder. I want that to be copper. Because I'm dumb. Dragon X Benedict said, I like the idea of guns being more of a status symbol, kind of like how bows are in our world. That's kind of how I'm thinking, and I don't know. I mean, we've got a long way to go, and it's also probably not a great idea to define it for the whole world. Obviously, you know, that's not really how things work, but in general, in Central Dragongrin, who would have a gun, would they have a gun, and why? I think that that's something to ask, and I don't know if I have the answer other than, for the sake of the flavor, I don't think they'd be around. Even though we're talking about this tech and these Sarfin gnomes, and it's like, to me, and I'm just making this up on the spot, but to me, the Sarfin gnomes would have honed their ability to appoint magically and using psionics to where firearms would be a step down. They would be more crude and with a mischance as far as misfiring or exploding. I almost see it as like, they're like, nah, that's kind of a step down. To them, that's like sticks and stones, where they're like, no, why not just, from the source, shoot that blast from my hand? I don't know. That's something to think about. Rob Coletta says, I want a boat in Dragongrin to see how long I'd be able to maintain it. Well, you're going to have your Dismembered Lord port feeds. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got these bleak barnacles. Look, they're all right up her back. It's going to cost you. Oh, you need the bleak fuel? Woo! Only takes diesel. Hope you brought your Dragongrin visa. Sean Murphy says, Metallica's cover of Veteran of the Psychic Wars is great. Yeah, I love it. I really enjoyed it. What's up, Steven? Spencer Shields is also here. I think we're going to call it pretty soon. I certainly never want to ramble, but I also do like to have spitball conversations. I like to just talk this stuff out, mainly because I think it demystifies the creative process. And one of the cool things I like to do is I absolutely will go back and I will listen to these when I'm writing the lore, because I want to know what strikes me again for the second time. So I'll wait a week, 2 weeks, and then I'll pop on one of these videos in the background and kind of listen to it and transcribe some of the ideas and things that I'd said. What it does is it allows it to sort of rest enough to where I decide where I'm at. I have more of an opinion. The second thing is, it's really cool to see stuff that's talked about in a Daily Damage or a Damage Reduction or world building show on our YouTube channel. It's cool to see the kind of genesis of that stuff and then see it come into fruition. Like even, this is a sort of peripheral example, but our podcast, Destroy Artifact. Several weeks ago, I was like, dude, there's this thing, it's called Destroy Artifact. It's a name I want to use for something. I don't know what yet. It's cool to go back and see, because as someone who likes to create, I think the creative process has been mystified for a long time. It's like, well, I have to drink my magic juice, and then I have to sit in my special chair until lightning strikes, and then I have to type with one hand, and it's like, nah, you kind of just got to go for it and make it, just spitball it, you just say what you're thinking, and the best tool that I can think of to any writer is being able to record yourself. Because if you can do that, and if I'm talking and I'm kind of just talking this stuff out, later I get to hear myself and disagree with me. And James gets to go back and listen to it, and we get to talk about it again. So it's like brainstorming or barkstorming, and then going back and being able to listen to it. So hopefully it's valuable. Hopefully you guys have seen some sort of value in this. Hopefully it inspired you in some way. What are the gnomes like in your world? Do you have gnomes? Are they the standard gnomes from D&D? Are they dinosaur-riding cannibals? Sort of like some of the other settings have done with halflings? Tell me. Now, if you're watching this on Facebook right now, thank you for tuning in, spending this time. If you're watching this on YouTube, you are seeing a video that we took off of Facebook and put onto YouTube. So be sure to subscribe for these kinds of videos, but also go to the Facebook page where these lovely people are in the chat right now, like Rob, and Lawrence just joined us. And be sure to like our Facebook page, because then you'll get these notifications when we do daily damage, so you can be a part of the conversation, chime in, give your thoughts, etc. So, love it. And if you guys ever have any ideas for questions you want to ask us and you want us to go over in a daily damage, that'd be great too. But thank you all. It has been a joy, as always. Thank you for spending your lunch hour or your lazy work hour with me. But until the next time we talk, may your dice roll high. It's not letting me tap the button. Oh, the new iOS update. It's a peach. Everybody gets a kiss. Mwah!